how to worship, which is what worship training is. It's how to worship. But as a parent, trying to instill in our children a love of worship. And that's, confess, it's been a couple years since I've read through this book, but I still highly recommend it. It's written by Kathleen Chapman, and she is a children's director and has been for many decades. And she was facing the question of why are so many churched children? They go from kindergarten through high school, they graduate, they go away to college, and there's no more worship in their life. In fact, some of them even completely turn from the church and go down a rebellious road. Why is that? We've taught them so many things. They know so much about God. Why is this happening? And this is something that Nathan and Carter, I hear them talking about all the time. You know, all these children that came through Cornerstone. Why is there not a more, I don't know, on the face of it appears that the love of God that they experience here at Cornerstone is not necessarily following them when they leave to go to college. And so that's a big challenge that Carter and Nathan are dealing with. Well, Miss Chapman's answer is worship, the love of worship. That is the glue. She calls it the glue that's going to keep a child worshiping from the time that they're with you in your house to when they leave, because they have developed a love of worship. And it's not just worshiping at church, although that's what we're working on here. It's worshiping in every part of our lives, as y'all know, service and praise and offerings and submission and sacrifice, all those things, you know, are worshipful to God. So I was going to read from that, but I won't put y'all through that. But I just wanted y'all to understand that this is our goal, to teach them how to worship, because not all parents are ready to take on that challenge or even know that they should or know how. And so that's our job. We're willing and happy to step in, and as part of our covenantal family. These are our covenantal kids. Those of y'all who have kids out of the house now, y'all know that your job's not done. Y'all have been wonderful about continuing with your volunteer hours and your time and your love with VBS and all the other children's ministry things to continue to disciple us young mothers and also our young kids. So I really appreciate that. All right. Like I said, our compromise is to offer worship training, not children's church. There's a big difference. This allows our younger children the opportunity to participate in worship, but in such a way as to help them understand the whys and hows of worship. Dialogue with the children is the key ingredient of worship training. It's the why do we worship, who do we worship, how do we come to worship. The main portion or the main focus of worship training is not to make it through this outline that most of y'all have already gone through with the kids. I think I've been using this worship outline for a couple of years now. And I don't change it on purpose, because it's got the Apostles' Creed in there, it has the Lord's Prayer in there, and it has the doxology. These are all very three basic, like the ABCs to me, that a child should know and will help them to participate if they know the words. Now, the Apostles' Creed, they may not understand it at age 3 and 4, but memorizing it and knowing it so that when they are in big church, they can speak it on those weeks that we do it. But the other things, the call to worship and the time of renewal and the praying for one another, I really don't change the scripture references for those so that they can, again, just to start memorizing, okay? And after a while, after they've been there for several months, they will already have it memorized, and that gives you an opportunity to have the dialogue. So like I said, this is not our main focus. Our main focus is, oh, it's time to worship. What does that mean? How do we worship? Why do we worship? Who do we worship? How do we prepare for worship? What is corporate worship? Why is it important that we all sit in there together and worship God? And one of the things, I think I've already said this, but one of my favorite questions when I'm doing worship training with the kids is when we're separating from snack, making that transition into worship is, okay, it's time to worship. And Reagan and I have played around with ideas of how to take that focus off food and make that transition to, okay, now it's time to worship. And how do we do that? We've tried different ways, and it's not always successful because of preschool. And their attention span's about that big. But it's moving them from the tables, moving them to a different spot, But once they're there, before we even begin with anything, I tend to say, how are we to prepare ourselves for church? How do we come to church? Did you just have a fight with your little brother? Did you just pull his hair? Did your mother just yell at you? And are you like really angry that you're here and you want to be here and want to be at home watching cartoons? How is your heart? You know, are you sleepy? Would you rather be at home in bed? You know, that God calls us to be prepared when we walk in those doors on Sunday morning, but we're just as guilty. I know. It's hard to be prepared when you walk in doors. Your check written, is your heart ready? Are you focused? But, you know, Carter gives us that time. Okay, kind of shut everything out and take a few minutes of quiet time. Now, the kids, I don't give them quiet time to figure that out, but we get to talk about it. So that's just one of my suggestions to you. And then I'm going to let Reagan at some point go through the worship outline as a mock worship time, and I want y'all to turn it to the children. But before we do that, I do want to go over the curriculum, which we talked about, the worship outline. Last year, we switched over to the Story Bible book, the Jesus Storybook Bible. I love this book. The artwork in it is extremely colorful, and to me, it's more sophisticated. It's not necessarily a style I like, but it's much more sophisticated than what we were using in the past. And while it doesn't have every single Bible story that we're familiar with, it doesn't go from Genesis through Revelations. It takes the high points, the big stories, and it points them to Jesus. That Noah was a form of Jesus that pointed to that. In the Garden of Eden,